Hello, and welcome to our third episode of Bot Boundaries, where we explore what it means to be human in the age of AI. Today, we're discussing how AI transformation isn't just about adopting new tools, it's about weaving AI into the everyday rhythms of your business. We're honing in on where the real magic happens when big ideas turn into small, practical steps your team can actually use. That's why we're breaking AI down into simple, actionable moves that help small and mid-sized businesses build confidence when using AI, how you can stay competitive and also grow sustainably. My name is Jackie Gutierrez, and with me is my co-host, Katie Wilson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jackie. Happy to be here.
Okay, great. Let's get started. Well, before we get into the practical steps and jump into the how to, let's chat about a few small business use cases to show what AI transformation or implementation can look like in practice with some common examples. So, first, there's customer service. You can use AI chat tools to answer FAQs, to route inquiries to the right person, or even draft replies so you can free your team to handle the human heavy conversations. That's
Yeah, I
really a big one with chatbots right
yeah,
now.
I think that's a great one, a great example. I've worked with a couple customers in this space, and I would also say another feature that's I've seen more often is the ability to upsell. So if you're on Sephora or
Mm.
somewhere, they'll say, "Oh, you have this in your bag. Do you also want this that matches? Would you like recommendations on our most popular jeans or something like that?" So upselling in customer service, it's at that point now where AI is pretty great at that as well.
I love that. Yeah. Definitely a good use case. So also another obvious use case is marketing content. You know, you can get the help generating social posts, email drafts, or even ad variations based on what performs best in your industry. But I always, really encourage people to be careful on the visual creative side. You really got to make sure that it's engaging, and that it's really hitting your brand guidelines and what you know is really working with your business. Um, Another use case is sales follow up. So you can automate nurturing emails, lead scoring, or reminders so your sales team can focus on actual conversations with real humans, which is what really gets that account.
I think
Um,
research also is great in sales, like doing a SWOT analysis, doing these activities that would take in pre-research or prep. You can upload that
mm,
directly to your Salesforce or other areas. So that's a great time savers for sales teams too.
Love that. Yeah. So also with inventory or scheduling, you can use these tools to predict busy periods so you can optimize your staffing or even track stock levels a little more accurately. And then financial insights. So, spot spending patterns, help forecasting revenue, or identify cost saving opportunities without needing a full time analyst. Or if you have your analyst, helping them, just really automate some of their tasks so they can dive deeper and to make things even more efficient for your business.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of these are looking at ways to, like you said, augment and help versus
Yeah,
replace. And then the
right.
financial analyst is a good one because you don't want someone, finding, making changes to your revenue, your plans without consulting with a human first, because that could be very
Absolutely.
detrimental. But it can save a lot of time analyzing data and going through those spreadsheets and finding patterns, right? That's all the stuff good use of AI.
Yeah, and even your whoever's leading your financial team, they have to do so many report outs to various stakeholders and preparing how to translate all the numbers into storytelling. So even financial leaders learning how to translate those numbers into storytelling for these meetings is sometimes bog them down when they need to be really spending most of their time in the numbers and strategy too. AI can be helpful for them for that.
Excellent. Awesome. Now that we've discussed a couple of the ways you could use AI in your business, let's talk more about the practical steps. So, this is what I work with a lot of customers around. Okay, we have this idea of how we want to use AI, or we have a business proposal. How do we actually implement that?
Mhm.
So the first one is start with a real problem you want to solve. I know it can get like very hypothetical when we talk to AI and we think about ways that we can automate, but I think getting a clear challenge or opportunity, looking at those efforts and instead of chasing a shiny thing of like, oh, let's get this down to zero, let's say let's get a 25% improvement. So
Yes.
realistic goals too, I think are really important when we think about it. And I often start with time and effort. How can we offload a repetitive task? That's a great question to ask AI or to think about a workflow.
I love that. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Again, small steps, identifying, entry points, small areas where it has the biggest impact and it can be implemented quickly
Yeah.
in the initial stages. So it's not overwhelming, taking on too much implementation at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is checking your data and your team's comfort level in using AI or automating with AI. So this could kind of go a lot of different ways, but really making sure you have usable data, that you all agree on the data that you want to automate. And I think that really also goes back to having very clear owners for this project and often
Mhm.
cross-functionally. So who is the head person for AI projects on the data side? Who's the project manager? Who's the person on legal that's going to okay this? Getting that project team established early on and understanding all of their department's comfort level. Some are very comfortable, some are not. That's something to negotiate when you're thinking about automating a project or using AI. And that kind of preparation will make everything go more smoothly when you have a project plan with key objectives and stakeholders and owners and deliverables.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And that brings me back to what we talked about in our last episode, where we touched on how AI isn't necessarily replacing people. Those are headlines right now. Maybe eventually we will get there, but it's really about you can be valuable in your position and continue to be valuable as long as you are the one who understands how to use AI. And in this step that Katie just talked about, this is where you, as a team member who has those skills and understanding of AI, this is where you will shine, become more valuable.
Absolutely. Next one is picking a tool that fits your needs and your business needs, not the other way around.
Hmm.
So I think what often happens is someone in the C suite or someone in a certain department hears about a new AI product and says, why aren't we using this? Image creation and video creation is a good example. Like, oh, this is so cool. They launched this image creation, or we can do all our ads with this video creation. Let's pump the brakes. Like, is that what we need? How much money is that going to, and time is that going to save us? Let's really think about if it matches our goals. And sure, if that looks interesting and it answers those questions, let's test that in a small way and see if it works for us. But we want to really think simple, scalable, easy to
Hmm.
plug into our existing systems versus getting a team or training someone on an entirely new system. And sometimes that bright, shiny new thing is cool to play around with and like, automate a headshot or make images, but is it actually going to save you time? And to your point before, especially with images, is it going to meet our brand guidelines and creatives?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's an important part of it, making sure it's a tool that fits your needs.
Yeah, so maybe we should talk about this on a different episode. But I had just gone into Instagram and I had a picture of over the holidays. I had a picture of my mom and my daughter holding their Christmas cookies that they
Mhm.
cooked. It was so cute. And on Instagram stories, it asked me if I wanted to use AI to like a touch up. I was like, all right, we'll touch it up a little. Not that my daughter needs any touching up,
Mhm.
nor does my mother, but I don't know. I just want to see what it did. And this is a new tool. And there was my mom and my daughter, and I went ahead and clicked it, and it gave me back a photo of two like Utah moms holding pumpkin pies.
Like totally different. Yeah.
Yeah, like completely different. Anyway, again, a good example. We got to like really have the human checking your
Yes.
AI tools. And in some cases, we're not there yet.
Yeah, and test something in a
Right.
free way. Don't pay for a license of something that you're not going to use too.
Oh, I love that.
And that goes to the next point is work AI into your existing workflows. So adding AI where it naturally supports your team and is saving them time. automating tasks, analyzing trends, speeding up your decision making. A lot of times I have clients actually make goals for this in the project plan of like, okay, we're going to automate this. How much time do we want to spend? Do we want to save? Is it 25% savings on research time? Does it give us X percent more output? Does it lead to X percent more sales? So I think that's really important when you're designing this into your existing workflow and
Mhm.
quantifying or putting a goal around what you want to save versus
Mhm.
just arbitrarily saying, well, have AI do that. Let's add AI to it. Like that's not a goal. That's not something we can measure if it worked or not.
Yeah, I think that, we've all been vibe checking how AI is improving our lives in 2025 and 2024. Yeah, going from anecdotal a bit to more measuring is definitely something we could all do in 2026.
Absolutely. And that rolls into this one as well, but test it before you trust it. I love this one because run a small test to make sure it's accurate. At Google, we would have a lot of different features that we would recommend in advertising, but we would
Mhm.
often say to people, pick one campaign and not your biggest campaign, right? Let's pick a small campaign. So if I was working with a retailer, I wouldn't say, let's do women's dresses if that's their a top item. Let's do accessories and then test the small
Mhm.
improvement. Look at this automated bidding strategy. Let's see if it works. Okay, great. Now let's slowly roll that out to other things. Another great way to test it, especially if it's a marketing related one or if you're a geo based business, is by location. So let's just test it in this small geo and compare
Mhm.
it to another geo of the same size and see if the AI performed better or not. With a team, it could be picking a small team and having them automate a process. If it's a sales team, maybe you pick 2 to 3 salespeople to use the AI workflow, the rest to not, and then see how it works. But you really want to test it and iterate on that. You don't want to go whole hog into AI and into it automating everything if it hasn't gotten the feedback that it needs, because you will need to probably fix those prompts and adjust things as you go.
Yeah, I think being careful, your point, and choosing the products that are possibly least performing as the test segment is such a good point. So even in digital ads, if you have a winning ad that's like performing pretty well right now, I wouldn't
Touch
test
it.
a lot of these automations on that. Maybe on your second best ad or your third best ad, or just test it on a whole new ad set. It's such a good point.
Great. And the next one, roll it out in a way your team can actually use it. And I'll add to this, have an advocate, right? So if we're
Mm.
rolling it out, for example, in my background in sales, if I want to pick 2 to 3 salespeople to test a new process, I'm probably going to pick one or two who adopt new technology well, are advocates and
Yes.
can articulate feedback, will actually be a good case study and kind of can speak to the team and advocate for this new process and be like a cheerleader. And then I would maybe pick one person who is tech adverse, who is maybe a long-standing or tenured person who has their own way of doing things, so that you get variety of opinions on how it worked, but you have those cheerleaders there that will do a good job. And then will be honest if it's not working. But when you roll
Mhm.
it out to the rest of the team, you really need those advocates to say, hey, this saved me 10 hours a week. Hey, this actually led to a better output than what I was doing before. Because, management can say we're adopting this new process, but unless the team is really bought into it, it's not going to work and it's not going to be widely used by everybody.
Definitely. Love that.
And we got into this a little bit in test it before you try it, but expand once you see results. So this might
Mhm.
mean the testing period's quite long, right? You might need to go back and forth. Maybe you have 2 to 3 people and then you add 2 more people the next month and you have a gradual rollout where then we see some wins, we see some improvement. Again, going back to those deliverables, we have some quantifiable things that we can bring back to leadership and say, hey, we've gotten 25% more sales calls with this new process. We've gotten X percent more clicks with this AI generated ad. That's the kind of data you want to have before you roll it out. And then, like I said, go slow, start rolling it out to
Mhm.
teams slowly, right? And the last one I think is really important, putting simple guardrails in place. And this goes back to that founding team of how are we going to roll this out? What is the project plan? Who do we include in the decision making? Really important that we're thinking about things like accuracy, ethics, legal considerations, right? Depending on what the business is, there might be a lot of people involved in this. Oftentimes now at large companies, there's like an AI compliance officer within the legal
Mm.
team. Maybe it's within the IT or tech team, but there's like a head of AI that is going around the strategy and approving things. So if you don't have that yet, that's okay. but you want to make sure you have the right people on board to put those guardrails in place and to review the output and okay it, and realize that this is going to be an ongoing feedback loop. It's not a one and done. And we talked about this in the last one, that we've seen situations where, brands didn't put guardrails in place and it was giving inappropriate content, and we have to squash that right
Right.
away. And we have to be able to make it brand safe. So really having someone on top of that as their job, and getting in there and making sure the guardrails are there and adding new guardrails as they come up.
Awesome. That's such great advice. I love it. All right. So cool. So now that we've walked through the how, let's shift into some ways or trends around what we're all seeing in our collective approach in AI as we enter 2026. So one thing is the rise of practical AI over hype. And that's pretty much what we've been talking about in this entire episode, where small businesses and mid-sized businesses and everyone are really skipping the hype cycle and focusing on tools that can save time today. AI is becoming more accessible thanks to simpler interfaces. For example, with my software company, Dunsey, we really believe marketing should be simple, and we're helping you do that, so you can try it out. But yeah, there's just a lot of software platforms coming out that have like really niche focus on individual needs in businesses, that can really make it simple for you. Also, it's the shift from experimentation to ROI, which we talked about,
Mm.
right? Which it's not just about, I've got this anecdotal story of how it's improving my performance. Now it's about really like measuring results. It was fun making those AI images at the end of 2024 into early 2025, but we really realized that connection and authenticity really matters.
Yeah, and I would say to that too, like the stickiness of the product. Like, is it going to be
Right.
used, or is it something we're buying a license for and two people are using it across the company? So it has to be useful and practical. And you can measure that by usage. So absolutely check in on that usage, making sure that it's being used. And if not, maybe this isn't something we want to pay for or use going forward.
Yeah. And start with the freemium.
Yes, always.
Another trend we're seeing is the founder mindset shift, moving from AI is overwhelming to AI is a teammate. Founders can really lead AI adoption without being technical now,
Mm.
from vibe coding to using niche platforms for specific needs that I was talking about before, and really building a culture of experimentation rather than expecting perfection right out of the gate and just iterating.
Yeah, and I think to add to this too, there'll also be this influx of, that layer of human creativity. I've been
Mhm.
reading a lot about this, that like, as the LLMs evolve, that's a database of known information, right?
Yes.
What creativity is unknown information, because each of us
Mhm.
have our own creativity and our own background, which is based on our own lived experiences, what we've learned across the years, our own interests and all of that. That's in our each individual state. So you
Mhm.
need that human creativity element to work with with a successful founder, right? You're going to pick people maybe who are super proficient in AI and technology, but also have this creative background or experience level that you want to plug into, because that's one thing I think that it's hard to automate for.
Definitely. Humanizing it is so important, and making connections is more important than ever. Okay. And then the last kind of trend and area of interest that we're seeing is ethical, responsible, and
Mm.
transparent AI. Why small businesses need simple AI guardrails. For example, a small business might set a basic rule like, we can draft using AI, but we always need a human to approve it to ensure
Mm.
quality and accuracy. Or maybe a boutique shop could limit AI to behind the scenes tasks like inventory prediction, so customers always get a human touch. And then there's how to talk to customers about AI use. And an example of that is, to be transparent without over explaining. So if you're a service business, you might say, we use AI to speed up scheduling, but every decision is still made by our team.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah. And then to help to avoid biases and fairness, to encourage fairness and really secure brand trust. An example is to use diverse examples and data, like a marketing team could train, AI with prompts with inclusive language and imagery to avoid skewed outputs. Or another example is a hiring manager at a small company could review AI screened resumes, um, with their human eyes in mind to ensure fairness.
Yeah, I love that. I think this goes back to those guardrails we're talking about, some real life
Right.
examples of what those would be. And I think we're going to only see more guardrails and more instances come up in the new year when we start to see, some of the pitfalls or mistakes companies might be making and some of the new guardrails they need to put in place.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that brings us nicely to a new segment we have called Controversy Corner. So we were talking about this before, but we're talking about marketing and brand stumbles in 2025. What caused some backlash, and what, looking forward, would we do to prevent that if we were working with that brand or advising them? So I'll kick it off with Unilever. We saw a lot of articles around this. They were called out for greenwashing. So their consumers were growing very skeptical of their sustainability claims. And this goes back to like the images they're putting on the packaging, the labeling, and there is third-party verified agencies that do certify things as clean, organic, etc. Some of their stuff was alluding to that, but not actually being proven to be green or clean products. So I think this is very important, and it's different, and regulation is different for every country. So especially a
Right.
large global brand, you have to be super aware of this, because you are going to get the blowback of saying, hey, we're in the EU and this is not a green product. No matter how you label it, this label is misleading and now we're going to sue you for it. So it's very important to think about, going back to the branding. Yes, we want to make something look natural or using images that, talk about, recycling or whatever it might be. But if we want to say a certain certification or allude to that as a green product, it really has to pass a certain criteria and has to be strict about.
Yes, yes. In the United States, our restrictions are much more lenient. So they
Yep.
obviously possibly made a mistake when they took it to the UK and had their issue. Okay, so moving on, I have Target. So
Yeah.
earlier in the year, they experienced boycotts that are still going strong, and customer loss after rolling back DEI policies, showing a little bit of some misjudging on their specific consumer sentiment on social issues. And their consumers really cared about that, it appears to be. So consumers and influencers have been protesting Target's rollback of diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives, and really around their previous commitment to support Black owned businesses and LGBTQ plus founders and the like.
Yeah, we're starting to see that reflected in their results too. Although they wouldn't say it's because of this, they've
Right.
come forth with other reasoning. But a lot of critics online have said, well, it's because of some of the groups that are protesting, and look at the impact we're having. So I think this is a good one to watch in the coming year to see if they
Definitely.
slowly reverse this, what kind of partnerships they sign up for in the next year. And I think this is a brand, that has evolved over time, and they
Hmm.
could swing back the other way too. So it's a good one to watch.
Definitely.
All right. The next one is Heineken and zero waste. They were mocked for using woke buzzwords in packaging, failing to connect authentically with their consumers. So they do have some sustainability goals, which are quite noble, like zero waste by 2040, and doing initiatives with their recycled materials, in their brewer efficiency and other ways. But they were called out for not meeting actual specific environmental regulations. And so again, they're an EU based company. We have seen this trend before when we were talking about Unilever. Things are much more strict in the EU. There's a lot more regulation around this. And when they're not complying, it's going to be called out. So they were investigated for not complying with the Dutch law for beverage container deposits, delaying the system designs to cut litter, and other things, while still claiming to be green and recycling. So very important to make sure you're meeting those local guidelines,
Hmm.
especially if it's something you're touting in your advertising and in your core mission statements.
For sure. Okay, next we have Elf Beauty. Is it Elf? ELF?
Yeah, ELF.
Okay. Elf
Yeah.
Beauty. So they were boycotted over a controversial collaboration with comedian Matt Rife. Essentially, it was a campaign where Matt Rife and drag queen Heidi in Closet played roles of lawyers. And I guess the video was set at a fictional law offices of Elfino and Schmarns. So many fans quickly took issue with the inclusion of Rife in this campaign because he was previously sparked controversy and backlash from women, particularly after a domestic violence joke he made in his debut Netflix special. So there's just a lot of concern around violating the values of protecting women, especially from a brand who sells to the majority women. So, that maybe wasn't the best decision by
Yeah,
that brand. So be
and I
careful
would
with
say
that.
e.l.f. traditionally has been a very inclusive brand,
Mm,
and very women-focused brand. So I think that seems like a real, like, left turn for them, giving their
yeah.
previous campaigns, and that's why they're seeing that. I did see online that their CEO and others came out and spoke about it right away, which is great. I think when you have
Yeah.
a misstep like that, coming out and saying, "Hey, we messed up," or, "Hey, that wasn't up to our standards. Let's try to do better, but we still, really like the product we're saying, or this is what we intended by this ad." So I think you can come back from that for sure, especially if you're a beauty brand that's putting out multiple campaigns every year.
Hmm.
The customer mindset and memory is short. Perhaps, again, this is one to watch in the new year to see what partnerships and who they put forth as spokespeople.
Yes. Accountability goes a long way.
Yes, I think so. Okay, going off of that, another big one for the year was American Eagle. Obviously, they
Uh-huh.
launched a denim campaign with Sydney Sweeney with the tagline "Sydney Sweeney has great genes," right? And a wordplay around genes and eugenics, and there was a lot of controversy around that. They claimed, "Oh my gosh, we misread that. We didn't mean that at all. It was going for like a Calvin Klein jeans, like sexy
Mm,
ad," but it quickly got a lot of backlash online about Western beauty standards and it being racist. And you saw a lot of blowback very quickly. And I think this was one where, again, to the opposite of Elf, they didn't come in and say we messed up. They came and said, "You're wrong. That's not what we meant." And so I think that's a
right.
big difference. And I think if they would have come out, and even like now, Sydney Sweeney has come out and said, I don't really understand the controversy around it, or I didn't intend there to be controversy. That's fine.
Hmm.
But I think saying, "Hey, I wouldn't have used that tagline if I knew what that meant, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that." Very easy
Agreed.
statement to say. I think probably the best thing to come out of this was the Gap. They quickly came out and launched an ads with Cat's Eye, who's a
Oh, that
multicultural,
was fabulous.
multiracial
Yes.
girl group, and they had all their denim on, and their like tagline was very much of like, "This Gap is for everyone," right?
Yeah. And it was
And
far more
that came off,
engaging of a campaign too. The creative was
yeah.
better.
And it was great. It had music, it had like, sight, sound, and motion. It wasn't just a visual billboard. Although they had those assets, I think it's a really good example was they probably already had this campaign in we know how long it takes to do campaigns to get the sign off on that. They probably already had this going with Cat's Eye, but
Mm,
they were like,
mhm.
boom, let's get this out right
Good
away as
point.
our talk back to that. And I think they really won in that battle of awareness and kind of love online.
Definitely. That was a good example. Okay. Our last one is Tesla. So early in the year in 2025, the brand's reputation and recommendation scores fell drastically, possibly due to an aging vehicle lineup and the CEO, Elon Musk's increasingly polarizing public image and
Yes.
definitely controversial rhetoric. So while Tesla stock took a nosedive, it was really around March 2025. It gained most value back, towards the end of the year, although it's been down over the last week or so. And
Mhm.
just the past few days, numbers have shown that Chinese BYD has dethroned Tesla, possibly dethroned Tesla as the top electric vehicle company. So a lot going on there. Goodness, it was a big deal what happened to the Tesla brand this year. You saw bumper stickers around
Yeah,
town
I was
where
gonna say that, yeah.
where people were saying, "I bought this before Elon Musk became
Yeah.
who he is." So that's the most interesting one, I think, and definitely let's keep seeing what happens with that brand.
Yeah, I think that's a good warning of when your brand and your CEO are so enmeshed. Like Tesla
Yeah.
is Elon Musk, right? You would argue at this
Hmm.
point. And even when they were coming up, that was an asset right? Look how innovative he is. Look at this. And then
Correct.
when it comes out, now it's like, well, you've tied yourself to that person, but can they separate themselves from that person? Or is it always going to be so intertwined? And, he's taken a little bit of a step back with the government stuff, but we'll see, he's always been vocal. So, I think this will be one to watch,
Yeah.
particularly to see how the board and others react to it, how they advertise, what lineup they put out next year, and what innovation they have on the horizon.
Definitely TBD on that. So,
Mhm.
our overall tech takeaway from this segment and these examples just really show how powerful consumers can be and how the messaging, the imagery we put out, and who we choose to represent our brands is being scrutinized possibly more than ever.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Thank you. So as we wrap up, like most things in business, it's not as much about perfection as it is about progress. At the end of the day, implementing AI isn't about chasing trends. It's about making your work easier, your team stronger, and your business more resilient. So when we start small, stay curious, and keep our focus on people or our teams, AI will become less of a leap and really more of a lift for you and your business. As we move into 2026, we have a real opportunity to build smarter, more human centered businesses, one practical step at a time.
Yes.
So good seeing you today, Katie. As always, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn under Katie Wilson or my company, Serious Moonlight Consulting. You can also find us on Instagram.
All right. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Jackie Gutierrez. And on Instagram and on TikTok, I'm at Business Growth Gal and also at Dunsey Official, which is my software company. And please follow Bot Boundaries on at Bot Boundaries on IG, TikTok, and YouTube. So thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're available on all platforms and also on YouTube. Bye, Katie.